Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, Icsan, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if a person combines the roles of a chairman and a chief executive officer in a corporate organization?
What can Nigeria do to gain international recognition in the context of the application of corporate governance?
These and many more questions will be answered on
Corporate Governance Platform, a program designed to inform and educate our numerous viewers on the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities.
Join the Corporate Governance Platform crew every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on MITV, your talent station, via DSTV 255 and UHF 43.
Corporate Governance Platform, your strategy for the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities. Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, Icsan, the hub of governance professionals.
Many thanks for joining us on Corporate Governance Platform, coming to you live from MITV. I am your anchorman, Tunde Odeyemi. Thank you for finding time to join us on this program. And in this episode, we shall be taking a look at the concept of balance of skills and diversity on the board. And to take us through on this particular topic is a chartered secretary, a corporate governance consultant, a lawyer, and an entrepreneur. He is a 1994 graduate of law from Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, and was called to the Nigerian bar in March 1995. He holds master's degree in laws, business administration, corporate governance with a distinction, specializing in financial services regulations. He obtains a Doctor of Philosophy in Business Administration from Backward University. He is an alumnus of London South Bank University and London School of Management. It is my pleasure to introduce to us Dr. Adeyinka Azan.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Azan, you are welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for finding time to join us on the program.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, we are talking about the concept of balance of skills and diversity on the board. The corporate governance codes emphasize these two particular concepts. Can you please tell us the meaning of these two concepts?
Yes, balance of skills on the board basically involves a composition of the board. When you are composing the composition and structure of a board, you know, when you are putting together a board, you need to consider the concept of balance of skills and even gender. You know, you will see an institution where you find a board that is composed of all men. It is not well balanced in terms of gender. And then if you are talking about balance of skills, if you have a board that is all lawyers, it is not balanced in terms of skills. So you are looking at a board that has an engineer, that has lawyers, that has an accountant, with different mix of background and cultural background as well. So this put together is what actually makes a good board, you know, and this will reflect in the quality of the decision making of the board itself.
And the diversity aspect of it.
Yes, diversity. As a matter of fact, let's even take it out of our locality. If you are looking at diversity, you are looking at a situation where you have people of diverse background, diverse culture to be on the board of an organization, you know. So, for instance, if you have a board where you have a Chinese who is a board member, you know, there is a way this actually endears investor to such organization. I mean, bringing it back home locally, if you have a board that is all Yoruba men, or mix of Yoruba men and women, and you don't have people from the south, east, or from the north, it has its own implication as well. So, for instance, when you are considering anything on the board, you are looking at the interest of all stakeholder group. So people who are from other parts of the country would look at a board with just Yoruba people and they'll be wondering what's going on this board. So it will not really interest them to invest in such a organization. And then the skills, because of the complexity of the work the board does. So you are looking at mix of skills in terms of age, in terms of gender, in terms of cultural background, and even professional background as well. So all of this put together, when you have the appropriate mix, then it will make the board to become an effective board.
So you talked about different and diverse professions on the board, irrespective of the industry. Let's take an insurance industry, for instance. An insurance industry should not just have an insurance person on the board, should have diverse professions on the board.
Absolutely.
Then, if you talk about diversity, what are the benefits accruable to the organization that embraces diversity?
When we talk about diversity, let me pick age diversity, for instance.
Okay.
If you have a board that is full of all 70-year-old and above, what do you expect of such board? This is an age where we need to even consider youth. You know what happened recently in terms of the NSAS protest. Bottom line is that you need to begin to actually have young people on the board of organization, because they are going to inject new ideas, new innovation into how things are being done. But if you keep having a particular age set on the board of an organization, I mean, I'm not saying there's not something wrong with having elderly people as board members. They bring a lot of wisdom, they bring cognitive skills, because there is this Yoruba proverb: no matter how much a young person would have clothes, he can't possibly have rags as much as older people. So if you have a mix of background, then it does actually help the board, to perform effectively.
Okay, if we are going to have balance of skills on the board, don't you think we should compromise competence, independence, and integrity of the board?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I'll give you an example why I said it will not compromise the... As a matter of fact, it actually enhances the integrity of decision making. If, for instance, you have a lawyer on the board of an organization, you have legal advisor who probably will also advise the organization, the board. So the idea of the lawyer being presented in the course of discussion on the board would act as a check and balance on whatever opinion you are getting from your legal advisor. If you have a director who has accounting background, whatever it is that your CFO is bringing to the board for discussion, he has an idea.
Okay.
He has his views. You will be able to work as check and balance over whatever opinion that is being given. So when you now have a mix of different diverse professions, they are able to make their own input into the quality, and it determines the quality of the decision making on the board. Recently there has been a lot of thoughts about IT governance. Any organization that is forward looking in recent time with what COVID-19 has done to us, there has to be a lot of investment in IT. So a board that has a director that has the knowledge of IT would actually be able to look into the kind of investment the organization is putting into developing IT in the organization. So such director will have meaningful contribution to IT governance of that organization. So it's very important.
Okay, let's talk a little about the structure and composition of the board. Why is it that the structure and composition of the board is very germane in the context of the corporate governance?
I will look at it from management perspective. There are processes to management. You start by planning. So to me, structure and composition of the board is actually the planning stage of putting together a board. And when you are talking about structure and composition, by what corporate governance stands for, it's all about doing things and doing things properly. If you have a board that has appropriate structure and composition, the quality, the effectiveness of the board will stand out. The outlook it will have to the general public and the stakeholder interest would also stand out. It will also endear investors to such organization, and more importantly, the value proposition it gives to the owners of the business, who are the shareholders of the business. Take for instance, on a board where you have a separate person being the chairman, a separate person being the director, that is appropriate structure. Because when you have one person being the chairman and managing director of such organization, then the quality of the decision making is going to be wobbly. Because you are looking at a managing director who also acts as chairman. Then there is a lot of there will be a lot of problems that will follow. But when you have proper structure, you have proper committees of the board is in place, you have a mix of independent director, non-executive director, and executive director. And I will take you one after the other. For instance, for executive directors, you need to look at the complexity of the business. You need to look at the size of the business and even the operations of the business. So when you are putting executive directors in place, they are usually functional directors because they are involved in the day-to-day running of the business. So you need to ensure that you have a reasonable number of executive directors who are running the business on a day-to-day basis. And that will be determined by the size of the organization itself. Now let's move to non-executive directors. You know, non-executive directors are not meant to be involved in the day-to-day running of the organization. Their job is to give strategic direction, and they are not involved in day-to-day running of the organization. And for these non-executive directors as well, there is another species which is independent directors. And what the Code of Corporate Governance, Nigeria Code of Corporate Governance, recommends is that it should be attainable for everybody to ensure that for everybody to ensure that they have more numbers of independent non-executive directors compared to non-executive directors. So all of this work together to actually make the board effective.
So we should have more number of non-executive directors than the executive directors.
Absolutely.
Let's quickly go on a short break. We are still discussing balance of skills and diversity on the board. We'll be right back.
Corporate Governance Platform, a program from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, Icsan, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if our person combines the roles of our chairman and our chief executive officer in a corporate organization?
What can Nigeria do to gain international recognition in the context of the application of corporate governance?
These and many more questions will be answered on
Corporate Governance Platform, a program designed to inform and educate our numerous viewers on the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities.
Join the Corporate Governance Platform crew every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on MITV, your talent station, via DSTV 255 and UHF 43.
Corporate Governance Platform, your strategy for the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities. Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, Icsan, the hub of governance professionals.
You're welcome back. It's the Corporate Governance Platform coming to you from MITV. And we are discussing balance of skills and diversity on the board. I still have Dr. Adeyinka Azan here with me in the studio. Dr. Azan, we are discussing the issue of structure and board composition. Now, can there be a recommended ideal size or specification for a board structure that companies may adopt?
Quite frankly, there is no straitjacket way about putting in place a structure or size of the board. But you are going to be looking at the complexity of the business of the organization, and then the size of the organization, portfolio of its business also are part of the factors you need to put into consideration. So there is no such recommended size of board, because I mean it would be foolhardy to have a business that is not such a good business. Take for instance a startup or a small SME business, and then you're having board members of about 17. You need to also look at cost of governance as well. So it would depend on the size of the business, the complexity of the business, and also the structure of the business itself for you to determine the number of directors you require. Because in terms of running governance, you're also looking at the number of committees that such body can have. So you look at the complexity and the diversity that the dynamics of the board to determine the size. So there is no such straitjacket way to determine that for a particular company, this is the number of your board members. And that's why you will notice that even in the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, it's silent about the number. But again, you have to also put into consideration various other factors that will help you to determine what should really be the size of your board.
But then can there be minimum or maximum or proportions? You said members of the non-executive directors should be more than the executive directors. Can there be a proportion of executive directors to the non-executive directors? Or in a startup, for instance, can we have minimum number of board members And for a large company, can we have also maximum number of board members?
Well, I will treat it by handling it from the perspective of businesses that are regulated, for instance.
Okay.
If you look at the banking industry, it's a regulated industry. Apart from the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, all of these industries have their own sectorial code.
Okay.
So I'm aware insurance industry, pension, banking, telecoms, they have their sectorial code. And their sectorial code will make recommendations as to what and what they need to put in place. But when we talk about small and medium scale businesses, you could even have a small business that has 3 board members or 4 board members. Again, I take it back to the fact that you are going to be looking at the complexity of the business, the size of the business itself. Because when you are talking governance, you are also going to watch the cost side of governance. So this is really very important. So, but for organizations that are regulated, they have their sectorial code. And one other question that always comes up is that where there is a clash between a sectorial code and the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, for me, and this is what has always been taught, that the essence of governance is just to be able to attain that level where integrity of the business is not compromised. Interest of the company is always put at first. So it's very important for you to ensure that when you find these clashes, you take the one that appears to be harder, in quote, because what you are trying to do is to attain a high standard. So when we talk about the number of board sides, for instance, I mentioned that the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance didn't actually specify. But then for regulated industry who have their sectorial code, some of them do. Then you look at, for instance, the insurance industry, it says, their code says minimum of 7 directors. So if you are a consultant working with an insurance board, for instance, you ensure that at the very minimum, they have 7 directors. But where you realize that the portfolio of the business, the complexity of the business requires such organization to have more than 7 directors, it yields on you as a consultant or even the company secretary to guide the board and advise the board to take the appropriate step to increase the number of directors.
Okay, still talking about the structure and composition of the board. Are there specific advantages or benefits if a company gets the structure and composition right?
A lot of benefits.
Such as?
One, value proposition for the shareholders of the business. 2, it endears investor to such business. 3, the outlook of the business is good. So take for instance, when you see an organization that is doing well, the first thing you do as an investor is to open the annual report and account, which we call financial reports today. Yeah. And then you review the financial report. You see that all the indices are good. Check the structure of that board. Check the composition of that board. They must have gotten it right. But when they don't get it right, there will always be hiccups and there will always be issues. So it's very important for any organization to get the structure and composition right. This can be done through the guidance that the company secretary of that organization will offer. I mean, you can even go as far as getting a consultant involved, and then it can even give you competitive advantage in a very competitive industry like banking industry, where everybody is trying to play to have a huge share of the market. So you want to ensure your structure and composition is in proper order, and when it is in proper order, be rest assured that it will attract a lot of investors.
Yeah, you did mention consultant. I was actually going to ask the question, how can a company get it right? Board structure, board composition, you intend to get it right. How can you go about it?
Seriously, there is really no two way about it. We operate in a climate where we are guided by a lot of rules and regulation. Now, what does our corporate governance code say? So it behoves on the board of directors led by the chairman to give ethical leadership. Okay. So where there is ethical leadership, what that simply means is that you are complying with all rules and regulation. And by principle, even our code says comply and explain. So the company secretary of that organization is the chief administrator of that organization. Is a strategist. It's gone are those days that everybody thought company secretary was just to go to board meetings and take minutes. The position of the company secretary today, it is a very high position. It's a strategic position. So the company secretary should advise the board, guide the board to comply with all the regulations within the industry or the environment of the business of that organization. And if all of those are done properly, then that's what we are talking about, ethical leadership. When you have ethical leadership, you are talking integrity, of the organization, integrity of the decision making. You are making sure that there is no group of persons or an individual that is dominant to the extent that it can influence the decision making of the board.
Okay, let's talk about shadow directorship. What is shadow directorship, and why does the corporate governance code prohibit it?
Let me put it this way. They say you are seeing the hand of Esau and you are seeing the face of Jacob. If you understand what I mean, basically that's what shadow directorship is all about. Somebody is in the background giving you instruction, telling you what to do while you are the director in the organization. The code did not specifically address shadow directorship, but from all the provisions of the code, shadow directorship is totally discouraged, because we are talking about not having one individual or a group of people to be so domineering to the level that they are controlling and tainting the judgment of other people. So a shadow director would then be controlling and tainting the judgment of the director that is representing him on the board. So it's totally discouraged. It's not good for business, really.
Aside from the corporate governance code, how can it be avoided on the board, shadow directorship?
Well, when we follow the basic tenets of corporate governance, transparency, independence of judgment, fairness, when all of these tenets are properly observed, issue of shadow directorship will not even arise. Because if you are in a board where you can freely express your view, whether right by other people's judgment or not, your opinion is not tainted by other people's views or decision, or nobody is controlling what you say, and every of the principles of the code are properly applied and implemented, then you are good to go. The organization should be good. Everything should look, you are working towards a successful organization. That's where I see it.
Okay, now let's still talk about this. What's the reason for the code's recommendation that prospective directors should disclose membership of other boards, and that current directors should notify the board of the prospective appointments to be made in another company?
Yes, this is very key. Key in the sense that you may find a director that is being made a director in another organization that is a competing organization. Okay. Don't forget that this director has access to information. So for the confidentiality of that information, it's important for such director to disclose. Then it now behoves on the board to decide whether they want you to be a director in that organization. And don't forget also the time value you are putting into decision making on the board is also very important, and it will determine the quality of your contribution to the board. If, for instance, I'm aware the code does not really specify the number of board a director can be, but then the amended Company and Allied Matters Act that was recently amended 2020 actually specify the maximum number of board that one director can be, because again, a director is a human being, and the director is the mind and hands of the company. So at the end of the day, when a director is on too many boards, of course it will affect the quality of the decision making of such director. And then don't forget what we talked about, confidentiality of information. If you allow the director of Bank A to be the director of Bank C, D, there could be certain information that will work against their competitor. So the moment you have that kind of information, it will accrue certain advantage to you. So it's always best to ensure that directors who are being appointed to other boards discloses such appointment, even in the process, not even after the appointment has been done. You disclose it, and then the board will make a decision, even whether you should continue to be on their own board or exit the board and join the board of another organization.
And before I allow you to go, Dr. Icsan, board tenure. Do we have limited number of years that a member can spend on the board, or if you are on the board of a company, you'll be there for as long as you want to be?
No, that in itself has its own problem, and that's why you have policies like succession plan policies in place. The code recommends that you cannot be on the board of any organization for more than a maximum period of 9 years, every 3 years, and then 3-year term that can be renewed, so for a maximum period of 9 years. Otherwise, when you stay too long on the board, other things may arise. You may become too powerful and too domineering that you begin to taint the decisions of the board.
Thank you very much, Dr. Icsan. But let me quickly take your final word to corporate players on balance of skills and diversity in 30 seconds.
Yes, I encourage every corporate player, every board of organizations to ensure that there is, I particularly like for the gender balance, to ensure that there are women on their boards. A recent report showed that Nigeria is still very far from ensuring appropriate gender balance on boards. So I want to encourage every corporate organization to work towards attaining probably 40 to 60 men to women on their boards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adeyinka Icsan. That is where we wrap it up on Corporate Governance Platform for this week. Thank you for joining us, and we invite you to join us again next week, same time, same station. I am Tunde Odeyemi. Bye for now.
Corporate Governance Platform, a program from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, Icsan, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if a person combines the roles of a chairman and a chief executive officer in a corporate organization?
What can Nigeria do to gain international recognition in the context of the application of corporate governance?
These and many more questions will be answered on
Corporate Governance Platform, a program designed to inform and educate our numerous viewers on the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities.
Join the Corporate Governance Platform crew every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on MITV, your talent station, via DSTV 255 and UHF 43.
Corporate Governance Platform, your strategy for the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities. Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, Icsan, the hub of governance professionals.
Governance Platform, a program from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, Icsan, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if a person combines the roles of a chairman and a chief executive officer in a company?